In this video, let's have a look at some of the most commonly used functions of Python. First, let's open a terminal or command prompt on Windows. Type in Python 3 and get into the Python shell. Please remember that if you are using Windows, please use Python instead of Python 3. The first command that we would be interested to work with is dir. So dir is a function that gives you some strange output. As you can see that here a square bracket consisting of some strings here. Mostly they are double underscores. These are called dunders. We will discuss about them in detail as we go forward. But dir is giving you a list of strings which represent something called attributes. So if you don't supply any parameters to the dir brackets here, then it just lists out so-called modules that have been loaded into our Python environment. For example, we can load a module called sys by typing import sys, and now if I type dir, you should see that sys is the new entry over here. Similarly, if I type import datetime, you can see dir will now show you the datetime along with the sys because these are the modules that have been loaded. A module is simply a Python file that contains some useful code that we would be requiring to use in the future. But dir can also be supplied with some arguments. For example, if I type here dir of str, this time you may see a totally different set of entries. Now the entries here in this list are called attributes. Now the attributes you see here are the attributes of the class str here. Now at this time we may not know what is str, but in the future we're going to work on. But when we work with str, these things will be of some use. For example, I can also say here dir of int, where int represents an integer number. Now it shows the list of attributes that correspond to an int type. In both the cases, you can see that there are a lot of attributes that start with double underscore and end with the same. These are called dunder attributes, and for practical purposes, you should not be worrying about this at all. Which means that if you are working with an str or a string, these are the attributes that would be useful to us. And in case of an int, these are the attributes that will be useful for us to work with integers. The next function that we would like to work with here is a help. Help, as it indicates, gives you some help on certain things that you want. For example, if you would like to know what is str, you can simply say help str and press enter, and then it will give you a documentation for what is the meaning of an str, what are the various attributes that are there. So we just now saw some of the attributes over there. So the attributes are given some explanation here, each one of them. How do we use them? Is it a function or is it a variable? All those information would be available. To come out of this help, you can type Q and it will come out to your Python shell. You can also get help for a specific attribute of a class like str. First, let's give a dir str to see what are the attributes of them. For example, there is a isLower attribute. I can now say here help str.isLower, and then it will tell me what actually is that. It says that it is a method descriptor, method meaning function. Press Q to come out of that. Python allows us to create variables which represent some values. For example, I can say here my name equals to Vinod, and then I can say here a num equals to 12. What you see on the right hand side is a value or a literal, and that has been assigned to a storage location in the memory which is called as my underscore name. We refer to this as variables. A variable refers to an object. In this case, it's representing a string or an str. Enum is referring to a number called 12. To find out what is the data type of a variable, you can use the function called type. For example, I can say type my name. It will say that it is an str, and I can say type enum is nothing but an int. Unlike many programming languages like Java or C++, which are called as strongly typed language, a variable must have a data type in those languages. Unlike them, in Python, a variable need not have any data type. Python variables borrow the data type from the assignment. For example, my name is an str at this point in time, but if I have to change my name equals to 123, which is totally possible, now my name is no longer an str, but it is an integer. And this type of data type association with variables is called dynamic data typing or dynamic typing. This means we never have to declare a variable before its usage. We just have to assign a value and then start using the variables. Talking about the variables, a variable once assigned with a value will have a unique ID. For example, I'll say n1 equals to 123. I can check its ID and I get a unique number displayed over here. If I type n2 equals to 200 and then ID of n2, you'll see that it's a different number. However, if n2 is going to point to the same number as n1, then there is only one instance of 123 where both n1 and n2 refer to. So if I check the ID of n2, which is identical to the ID of n1, and the reason for this is IDs are given to the objects on the right hand side, not onto the variables. If a variable now refers to a different object, its ID changes back. For example, if I say here n1 equals to 200, ID of n1, you can see that earlier we got the same number for n2, now I'm getting it for n1 because the ID of 200 is what we are actually getting. This can be used for checking whether two variables refer to the same object or not. So if n1 and n2 have the same ID, it means to say both n1 and n2 are referencing to the same object.